I had 3 minutes to decide. The notary's pen was already uncapped. The folder was open on the table in front of me. My son's hand rested on my shoulder, warm, familiar, the same hand I'd held crossing streets when he was 4 years old. And the woman across the lobby, a stranger in blue hospital scrubs, was staring at me like I was walking toward the edge of a cliff she could see, and I couldn't. She caught my eye. Then she looked down at the folder, then back at me. She shook her head, slowly, deliberately. I don't know why I didn't sign right then. Maybe 63 years on this earth teaches you to notice the things that don't fit, and that woman, whoever she was, did not fit. My name is Gerald Marsh. I'm a retired civil engineer from Asheville, North Carolina. I spent 31 years calculating load tolerances and stress points for bridges and overpasses across 4 states. I understand, better than most people, exactly how much weight a structure can bear before it fails. What I did not understand, until that Tuesday morning in the lobby of Piedmont Regional Hospital, was that the same principle applied to families. Let me back up. My wife, Carol, passed 14 months before all of this happened. Pancreatic cancer. She was gone in 11 weeks from diagnosis to funeral, which is its own kind of cruelty. The disease moves faster than grief, faster than preparation, faster than any conversation you kept meaning to have but never got around to having. We'd been married 38 years. The house on Birchwood Lane was hers before it was ours. Her mother had left it to her. 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a half-acre of black walnut trees that dropped their shells every October and stained everything they touched. I stayed in it after she died because I didn't know what else to do. My son, Derek, was 41 at the time. He lived 40 minutes away in Weaverville with his wife, Tammy, and their 2 kids. We'd always been close enough holiday dinners, the occasional weekend visit, a phone call on birthdays. What I did not fully register, in the fog of grief that follows losing the person you built your life around, was how often those calls had shifted in subject matter. Less about how I was doing, more about the house. Dad, you're rattling around in that place alone. Dad, that property tax is only going to go up. Dad, have you thought about what makes sense long term? I heard the concern in his voice. I chose to hear only the concern. Derek had lost his job the previous spring, something to do with a company restructuring, he said. The details were vague in the way details are when someone doesn't want to tell you the actual details. Tammy worked part-time at a dental office. They had a mortgage on a house they'd bought at the top of the market in 2022. I knew they were stretched. I told myself that was why the calls kept coming back to the property. Financial stress makes people practical. I gave him the benefit of every doubt I had. It was Derek who suggested I update my will. He said it gently, over dinner at their house in November. Said it the way you say something you've rehearsed casual on the surface, but with a practiced lightness that doesn't quite land naturally. He mentioned an attorney he'd found, a man named Paul Garrett who had an office in downtown Asheville. Said Garrett came highly recommended. Said it would give me peace of mind to have everything organized. I told him I'd think about it. By January, he'd made the appointment for me. I want to be honest with you, friends. I was not suspicious. I was grieving and I was tired. And I had a son who seemed to be taking care of logistics so I didn't have to, and that felt, in those months, like love. It felt like exactly what a good son does when his father is barely holding himself together. I signed a document. Garrett's office sent over something Derek described as a preliminary estate organization form. I didn't read it carefully. I trusted my son. That is the sentence that still sits in my chest like a stone. I trusted my son. The appointment at Piedmont Regional was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in February. Derek had told me it was a follow-up from a routine health screening I'd had in December. Blood pressure, cholesterol, the usual maintenance checks of a man past 60. He drove me there himself. Tammy stayed in the waiting area with a magazine, while Derek walked me down a corridor toward a room I didn't recognize as anything other than a standard administrative office. There was a notary inside, a woman I'd never met, named Sylvia, with reading glasses on a beaded chain and a leather folder on the table. There was a document in that folder. It was not a medical form. Derek explained it quickly, too quickly. I can see now, the words tumbling out in a stream designed to carry me past comprehension rather than toward it. Something about the house deed. Something about a trust structure that would protect the asset. Something about how this was standard, how Garrett had recommended it, how it would simplify everything once it was done. And that's when I looked up and saw her. She was standing in the lobby we'd passed through maybe 60 seconds earlier, visible through the glass partition of the office door. Blue scrubs, dark hair pulled back. She looked like any of the dozens of hospital staff I'd walked past that morning. Except she wasn't moving. She was watching me. And when my eyes met hers, she did not look away the way a stranger normally would. She shook her head. I said, "Hold on." Derek's hand tightened on my shoulder, just slightly, just enough for me to feel it. "Dad, it's straightforward. It really is just—" "Hold on," I said again. I stood up from the table. I told Sylvia the notary that I needed a moment. I walked to the office door and opened it. The woman in the scrubs was still there, maybe 15 feet away now, and she was already moving toward me, glancing over my shoulder as she came. She stopped close enough that she could keep her voice below the ambient noise of the lobby. "Sir," she said, "I'm sorry to interfere. My name is Diane. I'm a patient advocate here, and I have no right to tell you what to do. But I need you to know something." She paused, looked again at the door behind me. "I've seen that notary in this lobby before, twice. Both times it was with elderly patients and their adult children, and both times the patients came back to this hospital later not for appointments." I stared at her. "What do you mean, not for appointments?" "I mean they came back as patients," she said. "One of them had a fall. One of them had a medication issue. I could be wrong about everything. But whatever is in that folder, please don't sign it today. Please have your own attorney read it first, someone you chose yourself." She pressed a business card into my hand. Then she walked away. I stood in that lobby for what felt like a long time, but was probably 30 seconds. Derek appeared at the office door behind me. "Dad, everything okay?" I turned around. I looked at my son, at the careful blankness he was trying to hold on his face, the effort it was taking to look relaxed, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger yet. Something colder and more precise than anger. The feeling a structural engineer gets when he's looking at a bridge and the numbers suddenly don't add up. I told him I wasn't feeling well. I told him I wanted to go home. He argued for 4 minutes. I counted. I did not sign. That afternoon I called my friend Russell, who is 71 years old and spent 30 years as a county clerk in Buncombe County and knows more about property law than most people who pass the bar. I told him what had happened and described the document as best I could from the 2 minutes I'd had to look at it. He asked me 3 questions. Then he went quiet in a way that made my stomach drop. "Gerald," he said, "you need to get a copy of whatever you signed in January." I didn't know how, so Russell helped me. It took 4 days and a written request to Garrett's office, which I sent by certified mail with a return receipt, because Russell told me to do it that way. When the document arrived, Russell drove over, and we sat at my kitchen table with reading glasses and a second pot of coffee, and we went through it page by page. The January document was not an estate organization form. It was a deed transfer. My house, Carol's house, her mother's house, 38 years of our life on Birchwood Lane had been transferred into a revocable trust, with Derek and Tammy listed as co-trustees, with full disposition authority. There was my signature on the last page. My handwriting, no question. But the document I remembered signing was 2 pages. What Russell was holding was 6 pages, and pages 3 through 5 contained language I had never seen. "This is fraud," Russell said. He didn't say it dramatically. He said it the way you state a load calculation plainly, because the number is what it is. We also found, when I called my insurance company that week, that a change of beneficiary form had been submitted on my life insurance policy in December. The new beneficiary was a trust account I did not recognize. The signature on the form was mine. I had not signed it. I want to tell you, friends, that I handled what came next with perfect composure. I want to tell you I was calm and methodical and never once sat alone in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, trying to understand how my son, the boy I taught to ride a bike on the driveway of that very house, had looked me in the eye every day for months while this was happening. But that's not the truth. The truth is, I fell apart for about a week. I cried in a way I hadn't cried since Carol died. I called my daughter Patrice in Sacramento and could barely get through the sentences to tell her what I'd found. Patrice was the one who steadied me. She flew in 4 days later, and she brought an attorney with her, not Garrett, not anyone Derek had ever mentioned, but a woman named Catherine Oakes, who specialized in elder financial exploitation and who had seen, she told me, every version of this story. "Your situation is not unusual," Catherine said, which I found both comforting and deeply disturbing. "What's unusual is that you stopped when you did." She told me that the document I'd signed in January had been altered after my signature was obtained, pages inserted, language added. She told me the beneficiary form on my life insurance appeared to be a forgery. She told me that what had happened constituted elder financial fraud, deed fraud, and attempted grand larceny, and that the life insurance forgery alone was a federal offense. She asked me if I wanted to pursue it. I thought about what Diane, the patient advocate, had told me. I thought about the 2 patients she'd mentioned, the fall, the medication issue. I thought about where I would have been if I'd signed that second document. If Tammy and Derek had obtained full disposition authority over the house. If my life insurance had already been redirected. I thought about what the next step in that plan might have looked like. Yes, I said, I want to pursue it. Catherine worked with a forensic document examiner who confirmed the insertion of pages in the January deed transfer. She worked with the North Carolina Attorney General's Elder Fraud Unit, which had more resources and more appetite for this kind of case than I'd expected. A detective named Hargrove, a quiet man who wore the same gray sport coat every time I saw him, interviewed me for 3 hours, and then interviewed Russell, and then pulled phone records and financial records I didn't even know were accessible. What those records showed was that Derek and Tammy had been planning this for 18 months. It started shortly after Carol's diagnosis, which I found to be the detail that cost me the most sleep. They had consulted Garrett, who, it turned out, had 2 prior disciplinary actions from the state bar about the value of the Birchwood Lane property and the structure of my estate before Carol was even gone. They had opened a shell LLC in Delaware 2 months after her funeral. The trust account where my life insurance was meant to be redirected was held by that LLC. The Weaverville house they were so stretched to afford? Derek had taken out a second mortgage on it in the same month he first mentioned updating my will. They needed the money. They had decided I was the place to get it, and they had a lawyer willing to help them do it illegally. The case took 11 months. I want to be honest about that too, because I think people sometimes imagine that justice is fast. It is not fast. It is 11 months of phone calls with Catherine, and meetings with Detective Hargrove, and being told to be patient, and being told not to contact Derek, and sitting in my house on Birchwood Lane, listening to the black walnut trees drop their shells in October, and thinking about Carol, and thinking about what she would have said about all of this. I think she would have been angrier than I was. She had a clearer sense of right and wrong than I ever did. Derek and Tammy were indicted on 7 counts between them. Deed fraud, identity fraud, forgery of a legal instrument, elder financial exploitation, and 3 counts of conspiracy. Paul Garrett lost his law license and was indicted separately on 4 counts. Derek called me the week before the trial. I did not pick up. He left a voicemail. I listened to it once and then I gave it to Catherine because she said to save everything. I don't remember exactly what he said. I remember the word sorry appeared several times, and I remember thinking that sorry is not a structural element. Sorry does not hold weight. The trial lasted 6 days. I testified for 2.5 hours. The prosecutor was a young woman named Renee Vasquez, who had the focused intensity of someone who takes this kind of case personally, and I was glad for that. She walked me through the January morning I'd signed the deed transfer, what Derek had told me, how quickly he'd spoken, the document I'd seen versus the document Catherine had obtained. She walked me through the February morning at Piedmont Regional. She asked me to describe the moment I looked through the glass partition and saw Diane. I told the court that Diane Whitfield, which was her full name, and yes, she testified too, had probably saved me from something worse than financial loss. I told them I didn't know how to calculate the full value of what she'd done. The prosecutor nodded and moved on, but I meant it in the most literal way. Diane had been trained to watch for exactly what she saw that morning. She told the court she'd attended a professional development seminar on elder financial exploitation 2 months earlier, and that what she'd observed, an elderly man, adult children, an unfamiliar notary, a hospital setting used as neutral ground, had matched a pattern the seminar had described precisely. She said she'd almost talked herself out of approaching me 3 times before she did it anyway. She deserves more than anyone has given her credit for. Derek received 7 years in federal prison. Tammy received 4 years and 5 years probation thereafter, having cooperated with the prosecution in the final months before trial. Paul Garrett received 6 years and will never practice law in North Carolina again. I am not going to tell you that 7 years feels like enough. I don't know if anything feels like enough when the person who hurt you is someone who sat at your Thanksgiving table for 20 years. What I will tell you is that the house on Birchwood Lane is still mine. The deed is in my name alone now. with proper protections that Catherine helped me establish, protections I understand and that I read carefully before signing. My life insurance policy has been corrected. My will reflects my actual wishes. Patrice flew back after the sentencing. We sat on the wraparound porch and watched the walnut trees, and she held my hand the way she used to when she was small. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. There are things I've learned, and I'm sharing them with you because that's the only useful thing I can do with what happened to me. Never sign a document you haven't read. I know that sounds so obvious that it barely needs saying, but I am here to tell you that grief and trust and the pressure of a familiar hand on your shoulder can override every practical instinct a person has. Read every page. If there are more pages present than you remember from a previous signing, stop. If someone is explaining a document faster than you can absorb it, stop. Keep your own attorney, one you chose, one whose name was never mentioned by the person who benefits from your assets. Catherine told me that one of the primary markers of elder financial fraud is the introduction of legal professionals by the person who stands to gain. Get your own lawyer. Pay for the consultation yourself. And this: if a stranger ever tries to warn you and you don't know why, give them 30 seconds. That's all Diane asked for. 30 seconds in a hospital lobby. I almost didn't stop. I almost said I was fine and turned back to the table and uncapped the pen and signed away everything Carol and I had built. The person who stops you might not look like a hero. They might look like someone in blue scrubs just doing their job in a corridor they happen to be walking through. They might say they could be wrong about everything and they're sorry to interfere. Let them interfere. I'll see you in the next one. And if someone in your life has been pushing you toward a document, a decision, a signature, talk to someone outside that relationship first. It costs you nothing. It might cost you everything not to.